Well, good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, Danvers. This is Jim Morose, and this is A Republic Always. This is welcome to 2026. we This is January 28th, 2026. This is season 2, episode 1, and so this episode is going to be named "Current Misapplied Constitutional Rights." You know, it's always a tough concept to see what's actually happening. So I just want to kind of go over what we last year in our first season. We had 8 shows, and we went over 10 different 5-minute videos that kind of explained, gave a quick overview of the Constitution and everything that it means and what it is and how it is. So basically, the first section is we started out with the Articles of Confederation, but we needed something more tight, more stringent. So that's when they said we need a constitution. So in 1787, they met in Philadelphia, and they were there for 2 or 3 months, and they hammered out the Constitution. And that's the second session. The third session was the limited power of Congress. And the fourth session was the limited power of the executive branch. In the fifth session, we talked about the limited powers of the Supreme Court, the do's and don'ts and the can and can'ts, the Constitution, and the real reason for the Bill of Rights. So we really talked about the Bill of Rights, and that's what we're going to focus on today is the First Amendment and the Bill of Rights. And then session 7, we talked about how our nation is a nation of states. It started out with 13 colony states, and the Constitution requires that each state be its own republic. So that's just another constitutional caveat there. And then Session 8, we talked about all the amendments that focused on civil rights. And we talked about, in Session 9, we talked about all the amendments that focus on taxing the citizens, voting rights, and the infamous booze prohibition that was a big turning point for this country. That turned apparently Americans really loved their drink, and it turned into a lot of moonshiners, illegal bootlegging of booze, and I think organized crime rose out of that debacle of an amendment. That's the only amendment that we wrote that had to be repealed. But at any rate, that was Section 9. Section 10, we talked about the whole overview that the Constitution was an experiment in self-government. We're a self-governing country. The government was designed to be run by citizen representatives, and we need to rotate. I mean, George Washington was pretty clear about, we don't have kings and monarchs and royalty. We need people to step up, run, and be elected for a short time, and then move on, and let new people come in, and so that we all need to live under our own laws, okay? And that's a big problem we have right now. But there's so many problems right now. Like I said, we're going to focus on the First Amendment, but as I talk about this, next month we're going to talk about the legislative and the Congress and how they've really overstepped and overreached their bounds, and how we need to rein that in. It's just it's a mess, and it's going to, in fact, that's why it's so critical right now, is because it's January 28th, and if they don't pass a continuing resolution, they're going to shut down the government again. And who is they? Who is they? They are the Democrats who won't vote for it, and the rhinos in the Republican Party that are like Democrats. They're like spies in the Republican Party. So we can, Republicans can't get people to stay in tune. But the Democrats, they all sing in tune. They all march in lockstep. It's a shame. And the Founding Fathers, again, that's another thing that was so important about the Constitution, is that the Founding Fathers, in their documents, they said, we need to have citizens representation, and everyone needs to live under the same laws. So we really need to focus on that. It was a document ahead of its time. You'll hear the press, and that's what we're going to talk about, the press, because they're part of the First Amendment, the free press. But are they really free? Because they only toe the party line. And that's what I lost my train of thought while I was talking. And that's what the Founding Fathers were, really against. When you look at go back to the books and you read and see what's happening, the basis, the foundation of the constitutional government is that the Founding Fathers loathed, they despised party politics, and that's where we are right now. That's why the continuing resolution is so critical, and it's partisan politics. And just because there's a few Republicans going with the Democrats, that doesn't mean anything. That's not crossing the aisle. Those people are compromised, and the whole Congress is that's why we got to vote them out. But I don't know, because the press scares people. That's what they do. They are abusing their constitutional duties. They're violating the constitutional duties time and time again. So, again, we went through our recap, and so I was going to give you a little quiz, okay, before we start. So just think of this. Okay, the first question. There's only 4 questions. Is the phrase separation of church and state in the Constitution? Yes or no? Whatever you think it is, it's in your mind, you're saying it. The answer is no. And keep track of your score. Okay, so what is America's form of government? Every country has its form of government, so what is America's form of government? Think about it. What do you say? It's a republic. It's not a democracy. This is question number 3. Where do your constitutionally defined unalienable, my mouth is still frozen, it's like below zero out there, unalienable rights come from? They're defined in the Declaration of Independence, which is the foundation of the Constitution, because we started out with the Declaration of Independence, and then we won the Revolutionary War, and then we came out with the Constitution. So, and it's our Creator, which is God. Okay, that's how they wrote that in the Declaration of Independence. We are endowed by our Creator with unalienable rights. It's our Creator, God. So, and the last and final question: the First Amendment right to protest. Is it to protest or to peaceably assemble? It is to peacefully assemble. It's not to protest. In fact, when you look at, so how did you do? There was 4 questions. If you got more than 2, if you got 2 or more wrong, you really need to try to get back to the basics of our country, because we're losing our country, in case you didn't notice it. So what I want to do is, like I said, I want to focus on the First Amendment and the press, but let's do the video first. Let's cue up the video, and we're going to talk about the press. We're going to talk about the press, but the press is in the center of everything. There are several different areas within just the First Amendment of that for our rights, and so we want to focus on that, but we'll do that right after we see the video about the press.
Liberal or conservative, male or female, young or old, Americans love to bash the news media. Once among the nation's most trusted institutions, the news media have fallen from grace. According to Gallup, even as recently as 2000, a majority of Americans trusted the press. By 2015, it had fallen to 40%, and lower than that, 36% among those 18 to 49. It's hard to see how this decline will be reversed. The industry has become politically polarized, and in the highly competitive age of multiple 24-hour cable news channels and the internet, it's under severe financial pressure. And this compounds an even deeper problem: failing journalistic standards. In the 1950s, the media universe consisted mainly of a few national television broadcast networks and local TV and radio stations, most of which got much of their news from major wire services in the nation's large newspapers. Most journalists were committed to producing objective journalism, fact-based stories independent of the government and of political parties. A reporter's job was to report, not offer opinion or advocate. Presented with the facts, it was up to readers to make their own judgments about news events. Opinions were supposed to be confined to editorial and op-ed pages. That world no longer exists. This lack of objectivity and the decline of standards is one reason, though not the only one, why newspapers and news magazines are a declining industry. According to Pew Research, print revenue from newspaper sales has declined from $47 billion in 2006 to $16 billion in 2014. Digital sales haven't come close to making up the difference. Most papers have been forced to cut operating expenses, slash staff, and close bureaus, overseas in particular. Ironically, there are more stories than ever to cover, and fewer staff than ever to cover them. This lack of information from professional journalists has been filled by a new source: social media and the blogosphere. When the Iraq War, which I covered for the New York Times, began in 2003, there were roughly 100,000 bloggers. Only a few years later, there were an estimated 27 million. The Internet as a news source has obvious pluses and minuses. On the plus side is that information is spread widely and instantly. The minuses have to do with the fact that the quality of reporting varies dramatically. It's not easy to separate the wheat from the chaff. Furthermore, many sites, including mainstream sites, have abandoned traditional journalistic practices and standards in search of more and more eyeballs. Objectivity, once the gold standard of reporting, is now often seen as old-fashioned, a ratings loser. When success is measured mainly in terms of clicks, the outrageous beats the sober just about every time. Inserting opinion, even in the middle of a news story, is a way in which journalists can distinguish themselves. And in mainstream media outlets, those opinions overwhelmingly tend to be liberal. This might not be so bad if journalists acknowledged their bias, but they almost never do. Yet the bias is obvious. According to a 2014 study by 2 Indiana University professors, reporters who identify as Democrats outnumber those who identify as Republicans by 4 to 1, 28% to 7%. The remaining 65% call themselves independent, but based on my long experience as a reporter, this is a fiction. That is, many reporters like to describe themselves as independent, but they're not. Not really. By any fair measure, this group is overwhelmingly on the political left. The obvious liberal bias has only served to push conservative readers to those sources that cater to conservative themes, further polarizing the media landscape. And unable to attract conservatives, the mainstream media have chosen to double down on views and themes that appeal to their liberal constituency. To give just one example, when Fox News broke a story in January 2016 about the discovery of top-secret intelligence on the private email server that Hillary Clinton used while Secretary of State, classified information which she had denied ever having sent or received, the New York Times buried this news story deep inside the paper. A decline in reporting standards, a decline in revenue, an increase in bias have made many wary of the people who provide them with their news. A certain amount of skepticism is a healthy thing, but a thriving democracy depends on a dynamic and free press. As much as people may like to bash the media, most people would far prefer to trust it. I'm Judith Miller, contributing editor of City Journal for Prager University.
Welcome back. Again, it's funny that 5-minute video was done in 2016, literally 10 years ago. That's 10 years ago. And funny that one of the top news stories, or a news story today, currently, is the fact that Jeff Bezos, who owns, runs, and operates the Washington Post, is having, he's laying off people. He's getting rid of the sports page, and there's been people, on social media making fun of the fact that, oh yeah, I always go to the Washington Post to get my sports news. Again, people, it's, the media has, it's a dinosaur. These printed newspapers that, this is 10 years ago, they were losing money. And apparently Jeff Bezos and the Washington Post have been losing $100 million every year. So why even, how do you run a business losing $100 million a year? Why would anyone ever do that? And then you look at what's happening on the social media. Then that was an interesting, and this was back in 2016, there was 27 million bloggers in the blogosphere. There is so much information out there. I think that's why you've got your extreme rights and your extreme left, and people in the middle, we the people in the huddled masses in the middle are getting, we know they're too far left, they're crazy. They're too far right, they're crazy. But where do we go? Those are the only choices when we go to vote. And the truth, justice, and the American way lies in the middle. We got to get rid of these radical people. And who are these radical people? Well, you better find out who they are, because most of the times we vote them in all the time. We got to get rid of them. And that's just another current issue that's very unconstitutional. Is what's happening is the auto pen, Joe Biden's auto pen, apparently, because this is what we call the conspiracy theory, but our Massachusetts Senator Liz Warren is going to be in the thick of this thing. She was a driving force in having the auto pen do a bunch of things that she wanted to have done. Because Joe Biden was, again, incapacitated for the last 2 years of his terms, which, again, the mainstream media, CNN, MSNBC, the Washington Post, everybody just said, no, there's nothing wrong with him. You people are crazy. Lord have mercy on us. So let's just step back a second. Let's put up the First Amendment, because that's what we're focusing on, the First Amendment. And again, it's pretty clear. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. Okay, so it's clear that we need the free press, but we got to ask ourselves, is the press free? And then we look at freedom of speech. Yeah, everybody's got the freedom of speech. You can say whatever you want, but you don't have the right to block the streets, yell in people's faces. I've seen videos where the radical left have their little bullhorns and they're blowing sirens and all sorts of loud noise right in Trump supporters' ears. That's an assault. You could blow up someone's eardrum, and that's not protesting. That's not peaceably assembling. You are assaulting. So once you cross that line, you're a criminal. You don't have the right to impede someone else's freedom. If someone else is just standing there doing it correctly and peaceably standing there, and people are assaulting and harassing them, and that's what's happening. And again, so it's all right there in that First Amendment. And the press is supporting what I named the show, the current misapplied constitutional rights. They're saying that in Minnesota, all these people have the right to do what they're doing. No, they don't. They are violating the First Amendment. In fact, they just went into a church and violated the First Amendment because there were people in there on private property, on God's holy ground, having mass with women, children, and just families and they come in and they might as well have been Satan themselves, led by Don Lemon and a couple other people that they have been arrested for violating people's First Amendment rights. So, but will the press, no, they're defending them, saying, no, they have the right. We need to know, love, and understand our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, and what this country stands for. And, my heart breaks with all this stupidity that's happening to our country. We really are going down the wrong path. And this year will, I don't know, it just seems to be getting increasingly worse. And again, to that video we showed, the media, now that they're not on print anymore, they have print and they have the online version, and the online version is kind of not making any money for them either. But everyone's just going for clickbait. They put up shocking headlines, and then most people just look at it and go, oh gee, yeah, that Trumpsy's an evil man, or all those ICE people are evil, and all those poor innocent families that are being arrested by ICE. No, they're not innocent. They're not arresting innocent people. They have a process. It's been going on since Bill Clinton to George Bush to President Obama and to Joe Biden dropped the ball. That's when that's when the whole thing just fell apart. And we've got millions upon millions of people in here that don't belong, and foreign countries just dump their prisons and their mental institutions, and they're all right here. So we have protesters protesting the arrest of rapists and murderers and just evil people. That's what we're doing. But that's not what the press is reporting, and it's only happening in Minnesota. Do you think that's funny? That I can't see the time? And but the it's only happening in Minnesota, and we had a technical difficulty, so I couldn't get my pictures up. But I had a picture of, it's only happening in Minnesota. I mean, there were other protests in other states, but they're not to the extent of what's happening here in Minnesota, and that's only because Governor Walz and the Mayor Fry and the Attorney General Ellison and Ilya Omar and the Leering Center have all been caught with their hands in the cookie jar. Millions, if not billions of dollars have been frauded from the Minnesota taxpayers and the federal government because they use federal subsidies for all this. And how did Ilya Omar go into Congress nearly broke and just living paycheck to paycheck or whatever she was doing, and she's probably on assistance, and now she's a multimillionaire? Again, it all goes back to Congress has failed the American people, and what the American people are failing the American people by voting these questionable characters into office. So that's what's happening. We need to step back from all this hype. Again, the Founding Fathers were clear about partisan politics. It's very toxic, very, very toxic. I mean, so if you go on the web, I mean, I don't even know. There was 27 million bloggers back in 2016. Lord knows what's there now. I don't even pay attention to that stuff anymore. But I hear about this blue sky. Apparently that's where the radical left puts out death threats and tell people how to assault ICE agents and do this and do that. And the guy apparently who assassinated Charlie Kirk was a devotee of Clear Sky, and there's a whole bunch of other people that it's just, I don't know if there's a right-wing version of that. If it is, I don't know. I mean, yeah, there are some, militia extremists, and but they're just trying to protect their freedoms and their rights. And most Republicans just leave us alone. Do whatever you want. But no, the socialists and the Democrats keep saying, no, you got to do it now. You must do this. You must. In fact, I'm watching the news last night. I try not to listen to it, but you got to at least see what's going on. So apparently, I don't know if it was West Virginia, or Pennsylvania, they passed a gun law, and they said that there is no grandfathering. There is no grandfathering. If you have anything that has a magazine that has more than 10, you got to turn it in or you're going to get arrested. And it's like, whoa. The Constitution is pretty clear. It says it right there. You cannot create an ex post facto law. So, of course, in today's English is ex post facto law. You can't pass a law that says that this is illegal, but you've already done it. You've already got guns. You've got this, the illegal that. So it's automatic. You've always been grandfathered. That's why everybody knows when you hear, oh, you're grandfathered because they passed the law, but you already had this stuff before. But they don't even want to do that anymore. So how could it have been legal for the last 250 years, which, by the way, 2026, welcome to 2026, it's the 250 year of our country and our freedom, and they violate it time and time again, from the state houses in every state to the we got Beacon Hill, so from town hall to the state house to the Congress in Washington D.C., they're all trampling the Constitution and trampling our rights, and the American people are going to have to wake up. So, like I said, next time we're gonna focus on the Congress and how they've gone off. Because by the time we meet, they're going to shut the government down again, and the press will blame the Republicans. But it's the Democrats that are stopping it. And that's the same thing that happened before, which was really funny. For the longest government shutdown was just happened right in October and November in 2025, because the Democrats didn't want to, they wanted to fund or have all the money go to the insurance companies to extend Obamacare, health care, but the whole world knows that Obamacare failed. It's a failing system. That's why they keep having to throw billions of dollars at it. They give it to the insurance companies, not to the people. So the Republicans want to give it to the people, not the insurance companies. So, the whole time the press is saying that it's the Republicans that are shutting down the government, and then when the Democrats finally voted to open the government, the press said, the Democrats agreed to open the government. So, but they just say that because we got to wake up and see what's really happening here. What is really happening? Okay, and I don't know. We've had so much history in this country, and freedom is very precious, and it's just very tough to see what's happening. When I think about these protesters, they're not very peaceful at all. In fact, there was a quote which, due to technical difficulties, I had a bunch of pictures I was going to show, but when I sent them to DCAT to load up, the file was empty. So, okay, I made a big mistake. But I had a quote from Martin Luther King. I'll just try to do it from memory. But basically, he said that hate can't chase out violence, and violence can't chase out violence. Only love can do that. Okay, there's a quote about that. And so, and it's almost, that's a biblical axiom. You can't, hate is hate, violence is violence, and you can't change people's mind with violence. You have to do it with dignity, knowledge, and education. And that's why Thomas Jefferson said the biggest threat to our form of government is an uninformed voter, uneducated voter, and they need to be informed. And that's what I'm trying to do here. All right, we got about 50 seconds left. So again, people, our nation is on the precipice of super chaos again with what's going on in Minnesota, and I just ask that you stop and pray for everyone in this country, from the huddled masses people, to our leaders, and to our police, and to our criminals. We need to pray for everyone take a step back and stop the stupidity. Take a step back and stop the stupidity. We need to stop being so extreme and get back to the middle. See you next month, and we're going to talk about the Congress and this time I'll bring my pictures. Good night.